What is your name and what culture are you representing?
So my name is Muhammad Alwan, and my culture is of the Indonesian culture. That's the one I'm representing right now.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
I would actually call them a variation of the word uncle, depending on how old they are relative to my parents. So for example, there's two words for uncle. It's and ua. So is for someone who's older than you, but also younger than your parents, and ua is for someone who's older than you and older than your parents. And that also applies to the female gender too.
How would you communicate to someone a different gender than you in your culture?
So growing up in Indonesia, I was kind of taught it's just treat them equally. That's kind of the move now, I guess. Treat them all equally and don't really have any differences from just treating them. But the way I grew up, it's like you kind of treat, especially women, as, I guess, not really fragile, but with more respect and more sensitivity compared to males.
What's something that you think is unique about communication and etiquette in your culture?
We don't really have, grammatically, we don't have formal words to show, like when you're talking to someone older than you. It's just something that's been kind of improvised compared to some languages where there's specific words that you say when you're talking to someone who's older than you. We don't have that. We don't say sir. We don't say ma'am or whatnot. We just kind of improvise it. Yeah, that's about it.
What are some things we do in America that would be offensive in your culture? What makes them offensive?
Being loud. Just being the loudest person in the room really isn't something that's considered to be good where I'm from. Because we're not very individualistic country, and just being loud, brash, and just kind of thinking that you're the best or whatever, which is kind of the stereotype of Americans from other cultures, that they're loud and they make themselves known, they make their presence known. That's not really something that's good in our culture. People that do that don't really get ahead. They kind of get left behind because we're all about not the individual but the team. So yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
What is your name and what culture are you representing?
I'm Mannan and I'm from India, so I'll be representing Hindu culture.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
So in our culture, basically communicating with others, in the language that I speak, which is Hindi, we usually use the word aap to communicate with someone older and tu to communicate with someone younger.
How would you communicate to someone a different gender than you in your culture?
Talking with other genders is basically the same as how we do in America, so it's really not that different how you would communicate with the same gender.
What's something that you think is unique about communication and etiquette in your culture?
We try to give respect to anyone who's older. So anyone who's older than you, you'll call uncle, or basically give them respect and call them aap instead of calling them by their first name.
What are some things we do in America that would be offensive in your culture? What makes them offensive?
In India, we usually try to give respect to older people, and in America it is very common to call elders by their first names. While in India, if you would call someone who's considerably older than you by their first name, or even their last name, and not put an uncle or something in front of the name, that would be considered offensive. Because it is very important in our culture to give respect to the elderly.
What is your name and what culture are you representing?
My name is Rebecca and I'm from Aberdeen, Scotland.
How would you communicate to someone older than you in your culture?
Just the same as American people would refer to someone older than them. We don't use ma'am and sir, but maybe Mr. and Mrs. And if it's our friends' parents, then just their name, not sir or ma'am.
How would you communicate with someone a different gender than you in your culture?
The exact same as American culture. Yeah.
What are some things we do in America that would be offensive in your culture? What makes them offensive?
So one thing is to me, and definitely my parents have noticed it and my family have noticed it, is Americans aren't very direct, and they don't say what they mean. And so if in the UK you were to say, oh, if you just met someone, you'd be oh, I'll call you later, and they never do, then a British person or a Scottish person would take great offense to that. but that seems to be very common in America, I've noticed.